Well, welcome to Digital Citizenship Foundation's Back to School Night. I can't believe it's already there, although the teachers are already getting ready for back to school. Maybe you parents are also in the middle of back to school shopping, and maybe you're trying to fix all the screen time issues that happened this summer when our schedules changed and our screens kind of took over our spaces in this very hot Utah summer. We're glad to be here. We're a nonprofit in Utah that serves parents, students, and educators, and we teach about digital citizenship, ethical and responsible use of technology. I know right now with my kiddo, we're kind of having a screen time reset, right? Because you do get out of your routine, and when we get out of a routine, we don't have the same rituals, the same schedules, and it can be hard when we go back to school. So we're here sharing some resources, sharing some information about what is going on, how to help parents, and what's happening trend-wise. So glad to be here. In the back of the room, we have some resources, some free books, free stickers that help some teens help design, and some things to help you remember, especially around AI literacy, which we'll dive into today. So I want to just pause and I'll ask, is there a particular topic that you're just top of mind? Screen time is top of mind for me right now with the summer. Anything that comes for you? Gaming. I'm hearing AI more. Social media sometimes comes up. Maybe there's an app. What are you seeing right now? The trends are hard to keep up on. One thing I tell parents is don't worry about the specific app or the trend, but watch the overall behavior. Yeah. That's a good point. A lot of times on screens this summer, especially with the heat, I feel it with the heat. So how do we kind of reset? And I get the good question a lot of how much that they should spend, and we're going to dive into that. It's how we spend our time on screens, not necessarily that time. But I feel for the kids, and I don't want to judge because I know I did too. I like cozy farming games myself. But when we talk about this, we want to go beyond screen time, beyond safety, to this larger picture. We're trying to prepare our kids for the real world where they're going to have to use technology. We're trying to also prepare them to be ethical and responsible. Sometimes the incentives to act one way or do something online are not healthy incentives, and we want them to be responsible. We want them to be upstanding citizens. We want them to advocate for themselves, speak up, and use the tools in a positive way. So going beyond just don't do this, don't do that, be safe, not too much screen time, but being a good person online, being a kind person online, and I think we could all use a little bit of that kindness. So that's about digital citizenship, but really the fact that you're here, the fact that you're listening and learning, parents are huge models of that behavior. So we're going to go into today about, we call it the 3 M's of digital parenting at different developmental stages. Just like you wouldn't let a toddler play with the same toys as an 8-year-old, and the 8-year-old doesn't want to play with the same toys as a toddler. They grow up, they change, and as they change, our tech rules and how we talk and think about tech also has to change. So let's talk about that important role for parents, which is modeling right up front. Maybe you've seen this idea of modeling. Little kids will often maybe reach for car keys or a phone, or they mimic. I remember I got like a little robot phone for my kid, and would just like pick it up and talk it. They mimic, they're modeling. You are the biggest teachers. You are modeling that behavior. And what you say and how you talk about technology is also part of that modeling. So one thing that we like to talk about is looking at the big picture with our kids and how they're using that technology is often a symptom of another issue. If I'm sneezing, I don't have the disease of sneezing. I have a cold, and sneezing is a symptom of that cold. So if a kid is maybe using the screens a lot, what's going on around? It's not the screens that are making it 100 degrees outside. It's a reaction to something else. Maybe they're away from their friends. Summertime, you don't see your friends. It's hard to get outside, so there might be other things going on, and it's a symptom. So if a kid is using things excessively or maybe not in the most healthy way, we try to look at why. And I like this quote. This is by a psychologist I've worked with before, Dr. Christopher Ferguson. He says, "We do not say those who are depressed have bed addictions, but we do say people who are depressed have smartphone addictions." So what is the why? I play maybe too many cozy farming games if I'm having a bad day, right? It's a symptom of what I'm doing. So think about that as we dive into the modeling of that behavior for our youngest kids here. This is when they're watching you and they're watching adults around them, and let's be honest, we're not always the best examples of that behavior for our kids too. So, hey, I'm told not to cyberbully, but I see adults doing it, right? I'm seeing those comments. So trying to model that behavior that we see, and this idea of creating norms and habits, and this is why summer is so hard. Our norms and habits are gone. Our routines are gone. But at a young age, if you it gets easier over time if it's already there in place. Then it's not like you're introducing new rules all the time. It's just like that's what we do. That's what this house does. And that's sometimes that I'll say, because families will have different rules at different homes. Like in our house, we have this rule, and in that house, they have that rule. And it's a norm, and it's a behavior, and it's a norm that I follow too. I'm not going to ask something if I'm not following the same norm and rule. So I'm just curious if anyone has like a house rule that you've done. What's your norm? What's a thing that you do around technology? Please feel free if you want to chime in. No screens during meals, especially in public too, right? Sometimes you see that as well. When I go to Olive Garden, I'm like, why are they here? Why are these iPads here? Like I'm trying to have a meal. So, and it's like an etiquette thing, right? A little bit of that healthy. So that's a great example. So there's a lot of different norms. I'm not going to tell you what those norms and rules should be for your family. You know your family. You know the ages of your kids. That's going to change as they grow. But what you want to do is set it up now, because it's much more difficult to institute a rule as a teenager. I remember my mother when I was like 15, 16. She's like, hey, we're all going to start making our beds. We're going to do these chores. And I'm like, I haven't made my bed for 15 years, and it was never a problem, and I'm not going to start now. And you really can't get a 15-year-old to do that at a certain point. I don't get it. I get the desire. It wasn't a bad ask. It wasn't the worst thing to ask, but if you have a norm and a rule and routine, the older they get, it's harder, not impossible, to institute that rule. So when we're talking model, let's also talk about AI. This is something that keeps coming up. I've been teaching this for about a decade, and I did not get many questions on AI in 2016 or 2017, but I'm definitely getting more now. For the younger kids, this modeling age is talking about what AI is. And kids anthropomorphize. Like their stuffed animals are real, unicorns are real. I believed unicorns were real. It's all real in this magical thinking. They're still figuring out what it is, right? And so they still don't have a separate sense of self. They don't see cause and effect as well, especially sometimes the littlest ones. They don't see that when they threw something, what happened, right? So understanding what's real is kind of difficult. I mean, we're all still, I hear adults debating this. Does it have consciousness? Does it have a personality, let alone a child? So how are we going to talk about this? You can decide how you want to do it, but one thing in my house I've been saying, I would say, what did math tell you when I say AI? But sometimes we like to give it names, and that's okay, especially for adults. But I said, what did math say? And to kind of differentiate what it actually is, so we're not personifying it or thinking it has decisions. So this is some research out of 2024, is that the elementary age children think AI assistants may have feelings or the ability to make decisions independently. So we want to start with this foundation of what's real, what's not real. It's kind of difficult to explain to a preschooler, but you can start by like how you talk about it. If I'm giving it a name and constantly checking it, that's maybe not modeling behavior I want to see. I want my kid to make their own independent decisions. And if they see me constantly asking math what the answer is, that can also spread to that too. So modeling behavior. And this is a hard one because adults are dealing with this just like kids at the same time. We're all learning together on this one. And that's also talking. So I could say, hey, I'm talking to math over here about the answer to your question, or whatever that is. Narrate what I'm doing, because kids don't, their first exposure to technology is not as a spreadsheet. You don't see them doing that. They're not looking at GPS, they're playing games, or they're watching videos. So the younger kids, if they see you on the device, they're probably just assuming you're playing a game and ignoring them. I mean, what else are you supposed to think? So narrate what you're doing. Don't give it necessarily names. Be clear that this is a tool, and this is part of our routine, and this is when I have it, and this is when I don't have it, and this is why I'm using it, and this is when I put it away. That kind of stuff at that young age is really helpful. And this is also where we want to have these conversations. Things happen. Kids stumble upon stuff. I remember back in 2016 was like the scary clown year. Yeah, my kid found some scary clowns too, right? Didn't know how that happened. Sometimes these things through a game, especially those freemium games, those ads and sometimes pop up that are inappropriate. They stumble upon it, they get scared. But if you have a relationship where you're already talking about technology, where you're defining the words for it, where you're modeling that behavior you want to see, they're more likely to talk to you. And tell them, yeah, leave the screen. Ask an adult, talk to me, say something and think about it. How did this happen? Because this will happen. It happens sometimes, especially if a kid gets an older sibling's device. Yeah.
I thought even with the voice activated searching, it's so much easier for them to come across things that they probably wouldn't ordinarily because they don't spell.
That's a good point. Like the voice activated, I've had my TV remote just pop up sometimes. Like it just responds, right? That's a good point. So they're not typing it in. They don't know how to type. They're speaking it, and like their Alexa could get them something, or their TV could get them something pretty quickly there. So great point. So, but as long as you're talking about it, right? If it's like, hey, we have no screens, we don't talk about screens, we don't talk about AI, then it's not necessarily preparing them for where they're at, and they're going to see it somewhere. It's going to pop up somewhere. So great point on the voice talk too. And this is also, our rules and routines are big because this is when we learn to self-regulate. And I was just talking to someone before we started this program about how even teachers are seeing the inability to not sit and watch a video, to not self-regulate in the classroom. They're learning at this. We're learning at this our whole lives. I should say that we never stop learning how to self-regulate, and sometimes you have to relearn this stuff, but children need to learn. And if they are always getting the device, if they are always getting immediate feedback, maybe that's immediate feedback from the AI, immediate feedback from whatever notification it is, it doesn't help them do the things that they need to self-regulate, like being bored, being upset, being sad. If the first thing I do when I'm sad is reach for the device, maybe I'm not processing those things or having that self-reflection, or how do I get out of it in a healthy way? Now, it can be fine sometimes. As I said, sometimes I want my cozy repetitive games to calm me down after a stressful day. But when it becomes that overuse, and then it gets into unhealthy territory, that's when we need to pay attention. That's when we need to look at the why and look at the symptom of what's happening. Okay, I want to skip these guidelines because you know what? This keeps changing. This is still technically accurate, but the more and more research that comes out, the research is talking about it's what you're doing on the screen, not necessarily time. So, pause. That's our younger kids. That's our 0 to 8. Those are our littlest ones. And now we've got a really critical age right here, the tween age, 8 to 13. This is when they start getting their more accounts. They might have their own Chromebook at school, their own email. They might be on different accounts. They might have friends you start not knowing who they are. And this is where we want to have these kind of conversations. Personal privacy. What do we share? What do we not share? How do we talk? How do we feel about social media? What does that look like? Or no social media. Actually, you're technically not supposed to be on there, but I will say, having worked with students for years, a lot of them are at this younger age. how do we create this environment of trust? So hopefully we've been talking about talking to the kids, going over things, making a place that there's an open conversation about technology. But this is where it really kicks in, because this is where peer influence is huge. It's humongous. And that's very normal. That's very developmentally appropriate. They're supposed to be leaving the nest. They're supposed to be developing their own identity and their hobbies and their interests and all these things. I love tweens. When you talk to teachers, it's like the middle school teachers, they like love it. It's like the love. That age is so fun. It's because that's who they're having, this identity formation. But this also means that they're pulling away from adults. So at the same time they're pulling away from adults, you don't want to lose that trust, spy on them, punish them, all those kind of things. You want to keep that open conversation going. So they get a little better over time, but this is really a critical age. So I like to say there's 3 things going on at this age. This is typically where they get their first smartphone around this age. This is where they hit puberty, and this is where peer influence is highest. So the trifecta is going on now, and this is where parents are so important, even if you do feel like they're pushing you away a bit, because they have questions. They want to figure things out. They might be looking up things. They might be heavily influenced by influencers online. So has anyone had a conversation about that? I bring this up because I have learned about influencers I never knew existed from my kid, and I try to watch them. Even sometimes they're a bit hard to watch. They're a little cringe. They yell too much at the screen. But has anyone had that conversation about our influences or in their lives, or thoughts on that, or anything on that? Our tween age.
I find most of them pretty annoying.
Yes. I know.
But generally, I just ask them why they're interested in this.
I like that. So
Person.
I appreciate your comment. I find most of them annoying. I do too. I don't know if those are Minecraft videos, because it's like like it's so fast and loud, and I'm like, I am stressed watching this. But yes, but I like what you said. So I'm asking the why. I'm not jumping to assumption. I'm not making a face. I'm not saying, well, this is dumb, because then they're not going to want to share with me again, because why would they? So I will sit, even though it's not maybe my jam. Although some things have been great. I have a fun time watching YouTube with my kid too. But at this age, they might not have the same interests as you, but you can ask why, and maybe you learn something about your kid in the process there. And I say at this time, peers are so huge that you want to stand by your rules, right? What are our rules and our norms? We talked about that, especially at that young age. It's harder to institute those rules and norms later. So take the hit for your kids. If you have this rule that they are not allowed to get on this particular game, or be text after this time of night, or even have a phone, then stand by that. But recognize that if you have like a fantasy in your head that a kid's going to be like, no, this is not right, like you have to kind of take the heat a little bit, because peer influence is so strong. And you have to kind of take the heat a little bit, because they might kind of push on you, even though they also want that consistency and they want that routine. I know that sounds weird when I say it, but when they lose that, it causes issues. We all get that way. Maybe you're on vacation like a little too long. That 2 weeks, maybe around the end of the year when you're confused what day it is, we need that consistency and routine. And kids do too. Yeah.
How do you handle when their older friends have different rules?
I know.
Is that kind of influence?
So how do you handle when your kids have different technology rules, and there's that influence? And that's right. And that happens. That happens also in multi-parent households, right? Where grandma has this rule, and school has this rule, and friends have this rule. And it can be kind of confusing, because there's a lot of different rules. So on that peer influence thing that we talked about, right? Like talking bad about their friends is like the worst thing you can do. Even if their friend is a little bit annoying, and even if you think it's a dumb rule, you keep it to yourself. Because that peer is so, and then you created like an antagonistic relationship. And then they might want to hide or not talk about that to your friends. So keeping it open and saying that, hey, we have our rules and they have their rules, and that's okay. And I'm not going to necessarily change. We can talk about it. Like, this is an age, especially as they get older, that you can have these conversations of like, Well, what do you think it should be in the summer? I mean, I think that you should change your screen time rules in the summer, especially when it is 100 degrees outside. It's just different. But you can talk about it with your kid, make a decision, and they're much more likely to follow that rule when they make it. And when we've gone to classes sometimes with students, I'll ask them, and it's interesting to see that sometimes the students are much stricter than I would be. So they kind of crave that too. But take the heat. These tween years are short. They might feel long, but there's a really important ages as they're growing and changing. And then, they kind of move away. Okay. On AI, though. So let's talk a little bit about that AI around this age, this tween age. I like what you said about why. We want to engage curiosity and critical thinking because one of my issues with AI, and I've got a few, is it can kind of shut down curiosity. It can encourage it or shut it down. If you have the answer in your hand constantly, then I don't try. There's that friction that I'm losing, that sense of adventure and zest and trying, and there's a developmental piece of that, right? To learn on your own. It creates autonomy, it creates confidence when we figure things out on our own. The AI can help with some of your curiosity about very different topics, but it can also make it it smooths the path too much, if that makes sense. So, talk about it. And let's talk media literacy. Why do you think that answer is right? Because there are studies to show that people are more likely to take these answers as fact. And that's a conversation to have, because how did the AI learn this? What's the platform it's on? How did it learn from your conversations before? I have had AI lie to me. Now, lie is maybe not the best word. Math gave me false answers with confidence, and since it answers so confidently, and we have our kids at these ages that might be lacking in that confidence because their bodies are changing and everything's changing, it can be easy to just take the answer. So curiosity, critical thinking, also some of these foundational digital literacy skills, they gotta type. You can talk, but there's a lot of typing and writing and understanding how this works. And this is something, so I just spent a week with a bunch of educators last month, humanities educators, and this was a big topic of how are we teaching these foundational skills with AI, when AI can write it, or an AI can do it, or I can spell it, or whatever it is, and where is that line? So are they learning the foundational skills? Do they have those skills? Because that can help prepare for that AI age. Understanding math, what math says. Okay, so teens. I don't know if anyone's got any teens. I have a teen myself. I like this age too. It's fun. They're usually figuring themselves out a little bit more, still dealing with puberty for sure, but they're also buying, selling, have a more digital online presence, interacting more. They're probably doing more online projects and digital projects at school. They might be preparing for college, right? Doing college applications. They could have jobs, all of these things. So some of what when we teach teens, these are some broad concepts that we talk about. We have a whole class on e-commerce. So, right, how do we buy, how do we sell, scams, all sorts of things. Now, kids start buying and selling before teenage a lot of the time, but there are actually teen apps. You'll see more Venmo accounts, or they're attached to the adult account. So if you haven't had some of these financial literacy discussions, they might not have had any formal education by 13, and they might be buying and selling and purchasing online. And now you've got AI on that, which disrupts all this dynamic pricing and changing too. So talk money. Talk money with your kids. Get them savings accounts. Talk about Venmo. Talk about scams. How does that look like? So I just had a conversation on dynamic or changing prices with my kid, because my kid tracks Legos and notices the Legos change, and the prices and the reselling environment. And so we had this conversation, why did it change? It was this and it was that. And that's how you buy and sell on the internet. It is changing so rapidly. Yes, adults are trying to keep up with it. So talk money. And then this idea of self-efficacy. If a kid doesn't try something, they can't develop that confidence. That's some of my issues with AI. And if we don't develop that confidence, we don't develop that self-efficacy, the belief that we can do things. It's kind of like if we don't have that, we just feel dispirited, we feel nihilistic, we don't try. That's where sometimes I'm just gonna get the answer from math. I'm gonna get the answer from AI. I'm not gonna have that curiosity. I'm not gonna dive in deeper. We want to develop these skills of trying, which means sometimes boredom, failure, and all that kind of stuff. Okay, with AI in adolescence, something more teens are using it than maybe that you know, and a lot of them have maybe a boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, whatever you want to call it, chatbot online. This is where they might be dealing with rejection. First breakup, first bigger kid relationships, heartbreak happens, all of this. Also, cyberbullying and stalking happens. Most cyberbullying is not through strangers, it's through people you know. It's like two teens who broke up and they bully, or a friend group that bullies. It's who they know. So AI, who agrees with mostly everything you say, and also is very confident in that agreement, and will flatter you, by the way. I had to have this conversation with my husband. I'm like, you got to tone Claude down a little bit, because I think Claude just thinks you're amazing. So let's tone this down. You need to tell Claude not to do that, right? But like, that's really appealing, right? It's frictionless, right? I don't have all that conflict and heartbreak and feelings and everything. And so AI is an attractive alternative. Not saying that there isn't a place for that in some ways. Some people have used AI as like a supplement through therapy. There can be some case studies, but really at a teenage, a young person, this is where they're forming their own identities and who they are, and the social skills are so important. And we're maybe not developing the social skills that we want if we're talking to a math problem. Other things around AI is job preparation. Looking for jobs has changed. How you find jobs has changed. They're maybe looking at finding something this summer or college. AI is in that space too. So what does that look like? How can we write prompts the way we want to? Can we make our own? Like, there's some great tools that even teens could use to help themselves. Like, hey, I want to figure out what I need to wear, prepare me for this interview, prepare me for this report. And there can be some really great growth that happens, but it also can be a crutch. So there's that line that we're trying to develop. Thoughts on AI? So I tried to do a really brief primer on AI for each age group, but is there something AI related that maybe has come up in your home, or you've thought about yourself, or you've seen?
I just recently saw something about the AI challenges that they're doing online, because the companies are trying to use that as a way for the AI to learn from kids.
Yeah.
So like there'll be like a challenge where they have them say something but do it in a different emotion each time they say it or something.
Yeah, and I could see why that's appealing. So it's talking about like challenges that the big companies are trying to get teens to do. Do you have an example of one? Like to talk a certain way, or?
Yeah, like say this phrase but say it with a different emotion each time.
Oh,
so
okay.
AI can learn what the different emotions sound like basically.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do.
So it's like saying it in different times with different emotions. So, I mean, I think you could come at it a couple of ways. It could actually be an interesting writing exercise for an English teacher, right? I mean, you could totally go the educational route. But one thing I think just like we talked about privacy and what's public, is a conversation on, like, what data are you giving, and are you comfortable with that, right? Like, what's public and what's private, and that is an issue. So people post less. The younger generations post less than like the millennials and the Gen Xers. They just don't put it out the same way, but they're talking to AI, which is kind of sharing a lot of that data. So a big thing that have just a frank conversation about that, just so you are aware. This exercise is fun, and I'm not going to necessarily stop you, but be aware of where that information is going. And be aware of the other impacts of AI. You can talk about, I've had conversations with teens about the environmental impacts or job impacts or whatever. So have it as a larger context. But yeah, it could be fun. Do you remember when ChatGPT first came out, November 2022, and it was like, I had to do limericks and songs. It was like quirky and fun. Remember, it was like the same thing as when the first smartphone came out and we all had weird apps that would do one thing, like make a burping sound. It was like quirky and fun, but now we're kind of getting into a stage where it's getting a little different. Doesn't feel so yeah, like what does this look like, and how do you feel about that? But I'm glad you glad you mentioned that because we're all giving a lot of that personal data for free. I think a basic primer for kids, I would say, in terms of like safety around, and also what's real and what's fake, is have a new chat for each topic, because sometimes it's just one giant long thread, and that's when you get things like the unhealthy relationships or the AI psychosis, or is this real, or the AI starts like it gets a little funkier the longer you chat. So some of the stories I read around AI psychosis, someone was talking like a year in one thread. So that's where I would caution with parents is break it up. So it has to relearn, start from scratch each time. And yeah, being aware of employers, AI can help find things. It can help you apply for jobs, and social media can also help you get your name out there, but it can do the either. And that's what we keep talking about. Like a lot of these tools that we're talking about, I mean, social media can be a tool, and AI can be a tool, and all these things can be tools. They have the good and bad attached to them. Also with teens, this is a big one, and we're dealing with this in my house because summer messes up our sleep schedule, right? Is that if you're working with teens, and also sometimes at tweens, because their body rhythm shifts, their circadian rhythm shifts about 2 hours, they need more sleep. And I've heard it theorized that maybe some of these issues that we're seeing, our teen angst, our mental health, our behavioral health problems, are simply because the phones are keeping them up. It stimulates our brain, gives us blue light that keeps us up, that kind of tricks our brain not to make as much melatonin, so we go to sleep. Maybe we just all need a little more sleep. I think we could also say this about parents. Parents could probably use a little more sleep there too. So if you're going to have a rule, this is one I would recommend: no technology in the bedroom. And if they say I need an alarm clock, you can say, guess what? Alarm clocks still exist. They never went away. You don't need a phone. And on this, so right, we've had our little ones. We've hopefully modeled behavior. We're having these conversations. We're teaching them the basic digital literacy skills. We're talking social skills, but we're also trying to create healthy digital citizens. We're trying to move along from the passivity, from just consuming to creating. And this is what I said around like how screen time, the hours are not as important. It's what you're doing online. So if you just looked, I mean, I see these stats out there. Did you know teens spend 18 hours on, or whatever? I'm making it up. But you know, I've seen those headlines. But when you really break it down, if they're on their Chromebook for school for 4 hours, if they're talking to friends or talking to grandma or grandpa in another state, should that get the headline? Right? So it's not the hours. So these are just some ideas. When we've gone into classes and work with teens, sometimes we'll ask them like, what category, what is your downtime, what do you like to do online, and like where do we put that? And a lot of us are in the middle, like I'm watching something but I'm posting or I'm commenting at the same time. But we really want to use these tools in healthy, constructive, and like good ways to give back. Like, how can I share something? Can I teach something? Can I learn something? Can I use these tools more than just like dealing with my emotions or trying to escape or trying not to face these heartbreaks and feelings that come as we grow up? How do we move more to be creators? Especially as our teens are going to go to college, they're going to get jobs, they're going to have to be creators. And they can be co-creators with AI too. They can be a great tool for them to showcase their feelings, their art, all of it. It can be a wonderful tool. But it also can be something else. It's got a double-edged sword with technology. So, as to wrap up on our teens, this idea of monitoring them, like we're involved, but we're not like over their shoulder all the time. We're trying to be aware of maybe the influencers, their friends online, what they're doing, and we're trying to be there for them. Because just like tweens are, there'd be this push and pull going on developmentally, that's normal. But you want to be that trusted space, because things can get crazy. Things get like, the news hits them. There's a lot going on in their life. So if you can be that trusted person, you can be that rock, you can be that person to talk to, you can help them navigate this phase. A few other things before I wrap up, and I'll take some questions then. Digital contract. What I said earlier, if kids are coming up with the rules together with you, they're much more likely to follow it. So this also respects their autonomy and their decisions and makes it more likely that they're going to follow it. So what is your digital contract? I have some videos I posted on this with when my kid got their first phone. But what are tech-free times? Who's responsible? What information is shared? Passwords, all of it. So don't just give them a phone. Don't just like not have the conversation, here you are. Actually create a digital contract. And there's some different templates and things online, and you can go to some of our website and resources with Digital Citizenship Foundation and find them. But let's have this conversation with teens. When I did it with my teen, I was actually surprised that he was stricter than I thought. So I was going to limit YouTube a little bit. I was going to give extra time on YouTube on the weekdays, and he said it should be less. So they might surprise you. But we did it together. On this concept of symptoms and looking at the big picture and not the specific app, is watching. Are they disengaged? Are they not talking to the same friends? Are they refusing to join the family? Look at the symptoms, don't look at the technology. Because the game isn't going to tell you how they're feeling. It's how much they're gaming, or are they doing the game in its space of something. The phone isn't going to tell you what's going on in their life. It's going to be, it's a symptom of what else is happening. So be aware. This is tough. There's a lot of, but there's some red flags that we should all watch for. Okay, well, I'm going to pull up some questions to discuss. We'll take a minute here, and then I'll just kind of wrap up, and I'll remind you about the resources in the back of the room. This is a big topic. It's not going away. I appreciate that you're here. The fact that you're here is a big deal. We're all working on it. So questions or thoughts before I wrap up?
How do you handle it if you've gotten into some really bad habits with screens?
Yeah. And I get that way too, I know. So, and I think that's helpful to tell kids, like, hey, I did this. Like, don't, like, especially teens, they notice hypocrisy a million miles away. So I think just confessing is a good piece too. But it's like the incremental piece. It's like, okay, let's say I'm starting on a new diet. I can't be like, okay, well, tomorrow, I'm never eating carbs. I'm eating or whatever it is. Like, I'm only eating this many calories. It's very, very difficult to do that in a short period of time. So, like, breaking it over time and then trying to offer more incentives than punishments, if that makes sense. So with the YouTube, because we were having YouTube issues of too much screen time, we tried to like reward rather than punish. So hey, you're going to get extra money on your allowance or whatever you decide, rather than the alternative, because then it creates that antagonistic relationship. I'm not saying that there isn't some time that you might have a punishment, but gradually, because us adults, we can't adjust that quickly easier, and that's just how human nature is. Willpower is overrated. It really is. It really is. And the more we try not to think about something, we think about something. So a little bit of time, and maybe that's like 15 minutes, right? Maybe it's just like a little bit for a week, and then the next week is like this much, and then give it like a month or two. Yeah, but great question. These are hard. It is hard to set boundaries and keep to them. No. No, we're wrapping up, but I really would love to share some resources. So just so you're aware, there's a live stream going on right there. So I'm going to wrap up. So you're not in the camera, but I'll wrap up and then I'll talk to you one-on-one there. But just a reminder, we're Digital Citizenship Foundation. We teach students, parents, and educators how to be responsible online. We have resources on our website. You can also contact us to get like an AI conversation guide with your kids. We can come out to your school or your organization, and we appreciate parents and all they do. So we'll wrap up.